Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Coca, and in this video we'll be looking at how to use a balance to weigh out a chemical. So if you look in front of me, there's a zero on the screen, so there's nothing on the balance. This balance can actually read up to 6,000 grams, but it's not very accurate. If we were working with an analytical balance, we would see up to a fraction of a milligram on the scale. So in that case, we would see a lot more decimal places. If we were to put a beaker on the balance, you will see that it's displaying new weight, 102 grams. So that's the weight of the beaker by itself. Now, we can weigh out a chemical on this scale by one of two ways. We can add it to the beaker at this point, and in that case, we would then have to determine the mass of the chemical by subtracting the mass of the beaker plus the chemical from the beaker alone. So that's called weighing by difference. So the advantage of that is that it will take care of any errors that the balance might have due to not being calibrated properly. We can also take another approach, which makes it a lot faster. So if you're not too worried about the accuracy of the weight, you can hit the 0 button. Sometimes in some scales it's called the tare button, and you'll see that the balances will be reading 0 on it. And at this point, we can now add the chemical, and the weight of the chemical will simply be whatever number is displaying on the scale. So we're going to be using anhydrous sodium sulfate for this demonstration. One important thing that you want to always do whenever you're using a chemical, whether it's weighing out a solid or transferring a solution from one container to another, is always you want to read the label to make sure you're grabbing the right chemical. So it's a very easy mistake to make. Even things such as the molarity of the solution will make a big difference in how the experiment works. So if you open the container and use a spatula, you can transfer out a little bit of the chemical that you're working with and into our beaker. You always want to be careful not to spill chemicals on the balance. If you do, you always want to clean it up when you're done. If we look at our screen here, it's reading 2 grams. So that's the weight of the chemical inside of that beaker. Because this balance is not very accurate, that number can actually be quite different. So it could be as little as 1.6 grams or as much as 2.4 grams. So if we were really worried about the accuracy of that weight, then we would want to use a better balance. But for this demonstration, this is good enough. The last thing you want to do when you're done, you want to make sure you close your container. You want to make sure that you use the chemicals inside of this container. If there's any chemicals left inside of the container and that you're not going to use for the experiment, you want to dispose of it in the appropriate ways. Another thing that I'll mention is you always want to be careful that the spatula that you're using you don't use it for multiple chemicals. So for example, after we have used the spatula to dig into this bottle, we don't want to use it for a different chemical to avoid contaminating that second chemical.